Wild Lives by Faunographic.
Hey there, I'm Rochelle. Welcome to Wild Lives by Faunographic. Today we're catching up with the super inspiring Ian McAllister, who has dedicated his life to exploring, showcasing and protecting Canada's Pacific coast, which is commonly known as the Great Bear Rainforest. This is an area bigger than two Switzerlands, and it's the largest tract of temperate rainforest left on the planet. It's also Ian's office. Now, he's an award-winning photographer, celebrated author, and he's also the co-founder of Pacific Wild, which is a game-changing NGO. He's also a filmmaker, and you may have even seen his recent IMAX film, Great Bear Rainforest. If you're down under, it's meant to be released here at the end of 2019. Ian has worked in the area for nearly 3 decades, and as his work showcases, this extraordinary place and the animals who live here are absolutely unique.
Sprawling along Canada's west coast from the north of Vancouver Island all the way up to Alaska, the Great Bear Rainforest spans some 25,000 square miles, or 6.5 million hectares. This densely forested wilderness supports large concentrations of terrestrial wildlife, including Canada's largest grizzly bears, the super rare spirit bear, which is known for its all-white fur, and the Pacific coastal wolf, which is also called a sea wolf because it survives on marine life and deer. But this pristine environment isn't just confined to the land. The Great Bear Sea is one of the world's richest marine ecosystems, with its vast kelp forests home to iconic cetaceans like orcas, fin whales, humpbacks, Dall's porpoises, and Pacific white-sided dolphins, along with pinnipeds like Steller sea lions and harbour seals.
Ian McAllister has made this wilderness and its wildlife his life's work, and we're stoked to chat to him today. Hey Ian, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. I know how busy you are, so let's jump straight into it. You were born in Vancouver and you've been working the Great Bear Rainforest for nearly 3 decades. Now, I read somewhere that when you first arrived, you only intended to stay for about a week, but you've kind of never left. How did that all unfold?
Yeah, it's amazing how little twists in life set you on interesting courses. I grew up in the southern part of British Columbia, near Victoria, and spent a lot of my formative years exploring the west coast of Vancouver Island, and so I had a pretty good understanding of the brutality of what we had committed to, one of the most productive rainforest ecosystems in the world. And, over 80% of Vancouver Island's forests had been logged at that point. But I was fortunate to get on a research expedition, really more of a reconnaissance of Canada's northern rainforest, so the North Pacific coast of Canada. And the trip was only meant to last a week. But, as soon as we left the dock on Vancouver Island and a few days later arrived in these intact river valleys that the Great Bear Rainforest has become so famous for, it was an absolute life-changing experience there. There's nothing comparable to it on the south coast of BC after so many decades of industrial logging, and then to come to this place, the Great Bear Rainforest, and sail day after day and not see any roads or clear cuts and river valleys teeming with salmon. It was absolutely life-changing and set the course for what has been the last 30 years of exploration and filmmaking and photography and conservation work.
You, as a result of your exploration there and everything, you today spend months in the field. You get to know the animals' behaviours before you get to photograph them and everything. So you really take an intense approach to things. But conditions can be pretty tough out there. What does keep you so patient in the field?
Well, I don't think anyone that knows me well would ever describe me as a very patient person. But somehow, being out there, it really does demand a different mental state. And, to be able to, really immerse myself in the world of the animals that, we're studying and working to protect and documenting behavior, it really means, sort of leaving the mental state that I sort of carry with me in the city back on the dock. And it really, I think, just means that you have to have sort of a mental clarity to really interact with the species that I'm with, and I know that to be true with bears and wolves, where they have such an uncanny ability to really understand intent, I think, from people, even from a great distance. And when you're comfortable, when you're present and in that place, I find most other animals are much more accepting, much more tolerant, or perhaps even indifferent, but nevertheless they allow you into their world. So it maybe patience is one way to describe it, but it's being present in that place. Yeah.
You just actually mentioned the Pacific coastal wolves, who you've done a lot of work with over the years. Can you tell us a little bit about how they're different to other wolves?
Yeah, they're so incredibly different. Everything I know about wolves in the whole Arctic, where wolves are found on planet Earth, there's perhaps nothing like these sea wolves found on in the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest. These wolves are so dependent on the ocean environment, where they've co-evolved for so long. They really almost should be considered a marine mammal, that considering how much they derive their livelihood from the ocean. These wolves are fishing for salmon in the fall season. They're hunting for seals throughout the year. They swim from island to island. They search these outer coastal archipelagos for beached whales. The more you immerse yourself into the world of these globally unique, genetically distinct wolves, the more you realize how critically important the ocean environment is.
What's some of the most interesting behaviour you've witnessed from them?
Oh gosh, there's so many unique attributes to these wolves. I just remember first exploring these river systems and finding countless headless salmon strewn along the shores of these rivers, and thinking it's really peculiar bears that would only just decapitate the very head or the brain of the salmon and leave the rest. And it wasn't long when I turned a corner of a river valley and saw, the first time I ever saw it was this pure black wolf emerge out of the rainforest and walked into the river system and deftly caught a great big chum salmon, and then with its carnassials pulled the brain cavity out and ate it and left the body behind. And it was I had never heard of wolves fishing for salmon before, and the more we began researching this unique behavior and studying these wolves, we realized that there's this parasite that is harmful to canids, not harmful to bears, but harmful to wolves, potentially in the stomach cavity of salmon. And so the fact that they're utilizing the richest, fattest part of the salmon and leaving the rest alone just shows, again, this long relationship between really the ocean and the rainforest, that's the ocean providing so much life for terrestrial animals like wolves. So, fishing behavior, I've been following packs of wolves that emerge out of the rainforest every spring season to feed on herring eggs that are laid. Herring are these small smolt-like fish that come inshore and in vast numbers, and they lay eggs along the intertidal zone. And so the wolves come out and eat the eggs. And every season is different, but each season is really characterized by, at least in the world of wolves, by their ability to benefit from the ocean.
It's pretty extraordinary. You've actually spent a lot of time getting incredible photos of them, and it's documented in your books. Which photograph or series of these wolves have you been most excited by?
Well, they're pretty elusive and largely nocturnal. So any photographs you get of these wolves is pretty special. But over the years, I think the images that I find most interesting or compelling are the ones that really showcase that interface between the ocean and the rainforest. And so often when I'm observing wolves and I'm on a boat, I'll get in a wetsuit or dry suit, and the camera will just swim to shore and try to capture the underwater world, from under the surface, looking through that surface lens, at wolves fishing for salmon or eating herring eggs, that kind of thing. So trying to mix those different environments to show how important the ocean is to life here on land. any images that capture all those elements, I'm most proud of. Yeah.
So you've also spent years alongside commodity bears, which are commonly called spirit bears. Do you remember the very first time you saw one?
I do. Yeah, I was out photographing for the first book I ever did, and always knew that the mythical spirit bear. I had to include it in this book, but I hadn't actually seen one before. They're so rare. There's so few of them. They're one of the rarest bears in the world. Perhaps less than 300 of them in existence. Even rarer than the panda bear. And of course, they're found in this rather dark, dense, lush rainforest. So they're hard to find. But I remember walking up this river valley one day and turning the corner and probably passed about 5 or 6 black bears. And as I made my way up the river, I looked up and there was this pure white bear that came out of the forest to start fishing for salmon. And, I'll never forget that. It's just one of those really life-changing moments to, think of an animal that's so rare and in such a rare ecosystem, such as this temperate rainforest. The combination is just mesmerizing.
Mm. The forest is also home to a massive amount of grizzly bears. How do you make them feel comfortable around you when you're photographing them or just amongst them?
I think, again, it's just being really respectful and thoughtful. And, these animals have such distinct personalities. They're highly, highly intelligent, and they can read our behavior much easier than we can read theirs. And I think that, if you're comfortable, you're not doing something stupid like stealing one of their cubs or getting in the way of their day-to-day existence, then, they are hugely accepting and tolerant. They've had a long, long history of living side by side with indigenous people of this coast. And, the relationship between humans and the wildlife here is an ancient one. And it's one that unfortunately has largely been lost today. But I don't think it's lost within the DNA and collective memory of these animals. So it's really more about us finding our place again in this landscape than really trying to change the behavior of other animals.
You do work quite closely, as I've mentioned, with these animals for photographing them and researching them. Have you ever found yourself in a dicey situation with either a bear or a wolf?
Yeah, well, so far so good. I mean, I don't take, personal safety for granted because, again, a lot of these large carnivores are, very capable of harming people, and it does happen occasionally. But, this rainforest is so lush and it's still so productive that the stress levels and the reproductive rates and all of these things are still quite high and still, of a natural level that, that they don't see humans as competition. So I think it's largely a tribute to the productivity of their habitat that allows for such tolerance.
You have also spent a lot of time in the Great Bear Sea, as you mentioned when you were talking about going and getting up close to the wolves, you would jump in. You do spend a lot of time documenting the kelp forests as well as its wildlife. Why is the Great Bear Sea, why is it such an extraordinary environment?
Well, just in its own right, it's one of the temperate rainforests are one of the rarest forest systems left on Earth. They historically only occupied about 0.2% of the Earth's landmass, and most of what's left intact is found here in the Great Bear Rainforest. So you have this globally unique, incredible rainforest, but there's also, just on its doorstep, this incredibly productive ocean environment. And it's that intermixing, that interface of ocean and rainforest that is so incredibly unique and I think really what characterizes the richness of this coast, the ocean feeding the rainforest. And, just even considering the spirit bear, it's, why did this bear somehow evolve into a pure white bear. It kind of doesn't make sense because it's not really great camouflage to be pure white in a rather dark rainforest. But some scientists believe that the white coat evolves because it allows for more efficient fishing. So the white bear blends into the sky, which actually camouflages it, allowing it to be a better fisher. And I find that really incredible, and I think it's a great symbol of the rainforest and of the ocean, because what it means is that the power of the ocean through salmon is so influential and so strong, it actually changed the color of a bear.
Do you actually have a favorite marine mammal?
Well, I think we should be classifying these wolves as marine mammals.
Apart from the wolves.
Well, yeah, there's so many. Killer whales on this coast are so iconic, but the true apex predators of our oceans, and their ability to travel so far, being so long lived, just this incredible intimate knowledge of every bit of this marine environment. They forever leave me fascinated.
The salmon and herring are just as iconic in this part of the world, and they're so vital to the area's survival. From the other side of the world, it's hard to get a kind of gauge on why they're so important. Can you just run us through that?
Yeah, it's really hard to overestimate the importance of fish for this coast. Wild salmon are literally the backbone of coastal ecology and culture. It's what the BC economy was built on. The vast runs of Pacific salmon have literally built this coast. They are truly a foundation species, and yet today they're almost in a state of collapse, and it's almost like we've turned our back on them in favor of fish farms and other industrial activities that continue to place them at harm.
So you're a very renowned and passionate conservationist, and as such you created Pacific Wild back in 2008. Tell us a little bit about why you did that, and also some of your campaigns and recent successes. You've had a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish we had laws in place that would protect this coast and would protect wildlife and would help manage our behavior. But the fact is, Canada is an international pariah when it comes to protecting the environment. We simply don't have laws and policies in place that adequately protect this place. And we're seeing, ecosystems collapse, and we're seeing wildlife becoming extirpated and so many different fronts. So conservation organizations such as Pacific Wild are absolutely essential and instrumental in protecting this coast. Without non-government organizations using every tool in the toolbox to ward off and help ward off industrial behavior, but also help protect this place, we would be in a far worse situation. So founding Pacific Wild and working with an amazing team of conservationists who are so focused on protecting this place has been definitely one of the more fulfilling, roles that I've played on this coast, and something that will certainly continue in the foreseeable future.
What's been your proudest moment as a conservationist working with Pacific Wild?
Well, it seems like we spend a lot of time putting out fires, trying to stop oil pipelines and LNG pipelines and just really destructive behavior that we're committing to the lands and oceans. But we have had, some great successes, and, I'm certainly proud of the work that we did working alongside the Healthsick and Kitasoo-Hayhays First Nation in their battle to stop the unsustainable herring kill fishery. So that moratorium has been in place now since 2015. After many, many years of work, we managed to put a ban on the grizzly bear trophy hunt. So grizzly bears now can wake up in the springtime and not be shot just for a rug on someone's wall. We've protected, not nearly enough, but we've had some success in protecting large intact rainforest river valleys over the years. And there's lots of smaller campaigns and certainly lots of work left to do. But we occasionally can look back and say, well, if we hadn't been doing this work, this place would probably be a lot worse off.
Absolutely vital work that you do, and we really appreciate it. You actually were named by Time magazine as one of the leaders of the 21st century, which is pretty phenomenal. Congratulations. But what is your best advice to the everyday person who wants to make a difference, whether they're Canadian or wherever they may be?
It's a great question, and something that, I'm asked quite often. And I think that, you just can't let despair rule your actions. That, despair is what's, really killing this planet right now. And the fact that, as stressed as our planet is, and as we're in such a jeopardy position, it's still functioning. There's still so much life worth fighting for. And, I just feel that if people, treat this planet like they would in defense of their own home and defense of their own family, that, we can turn this around. And I just think that people just can't let despair rule their actions.
Absolutely inspiring and 100% true. Thank you so much, Ian, for taking the time to talk to us today. We know how busy you are and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it as well.
Thanks for listening. Now, why don't you jump online now and check out more of Ian and Pacific Wild's work. Head to www.pacificwild.org, and you can also check them out on Insta at Pacific Wild. Of course, for more wildlife news, views, podcasts, photography, etc., head to faunographic.com or visit us on Insta at Faunographic. Laters!
Wildlives by Faunographic. Check out our wildlife photo gallery at faunographic.com and on Instagram at Faunographic.